in Bridgerton withdrawal? Of course you are. Now that season 1 of Bridgerton is out, season 2 is out, season 3 is filming, you've probably had time to read all of the Bridgerton books, but you're thinking to yourself, wow, I wish I had more historical romance content to put into my veins. Well, here you go. This is the video for you, because I'm going to give you a book recommendation depending on who your favorite Bridgerton is. We're going to start with Daphne, who was the star of The Duke and I / season 1 of Bridgerton. Now, if you like Daphne's character, if you like the plot line that's in the book and the book and the show, which did stay pretty faithful, I recommend you read The Lady Gets Lucky by Joanna Shupe. While this is not a traditional Regency, it is a Gilded Age, which is basically like Regency America. And in this, we have Kit, who is my favorite hero, maybe of all time, who is a rake, sort of reformed, not completely reformed. And we have Alice, who really wants to become a seductress because she doesn't want to just get like handed off to any old guy that wants to marry her. So she approaches Kit and asks for carnal lessons. While The Duke and I is not like a carnal lessons trope, it is about Daphne's sexual awakening, and Joanna Shupe writes Alice's sexual awakening very well during these carnal lessons. I absolutely love this book. It was my favorite romance of 2021. You should definitely read it. If you are someone who loves Anthony the best, like me, and you want something similar to his story, I will say I did not put a Taming of the Shrew trope as a recommendation because I don't usually like those. I love that one, but that's not my favorite trope. So instead, I went with a reformed rake trope. And who's the best reformed rake in all of Romancelandia? St. Vincent from The Devil in Winter by Lisa Kleypas. This is an oldie but a goodie. If you've never read it and you're a romance novel fan, you need to read it because it's considered one of the best Regency romances of all time. In it, we have Evie, who is very shy, painfully shy, and she is about to inherit quite a bit of money because her father is very, very ill. She doesn't want her relatives, who are horrible people, to marry her off to her cousin so they can get at her money. So instead, she goes to this guy, St. Vincent, who maybe just kidnapped her best friend, and says, here's the deal. I have a lot of money coming in. I need someone to protect me. I want to marry you. I'm going to sleep with you one time to make our marriage legal, and then we're going to do our own crap. We're not going to have a relationship. I don't want to be heartbroken because you're just going around sleeping with everybody, and so I'm just not going to care because I'm not going to get emotionally attached to you. And he says, okay, and they do it, and it's such a good book. You should read it. It's a great reformed rake because Sebastian St. Vincent, Lord Sebastian St. Vincent, is probably the best rake of all time, ? So watching him get reformed by a shy, stuttering redhead who has no confidence whatsoever is wonderful. Next, we have Benedict, who isn't getting his season next. I hate to be the one to break it to you if you didn't follow this, but the Shondaland has decided to do Colin's season as the 3rd season rather than Benedict, which in the book order, Benedict goes first, then Colin. But I am taking heart that Benedict is such an amazing side character that they just don't want to lose him yet, and that's why they're pushing him. But if we don't get him in season 4, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm still going to watch Bridgerton. I'm obviously not going to stop watching Bridgerton, but I might write a strong-worded letter to someone, probably just a tweet. Benedict's story is sort of a Cinderella retelling, so if you like Cinderella retellings, there's thousands of them, but instead of giving you a recommendation for that, I decided to give you more of like the vibe of Benedict on the show, which is a little bit wacky. So I recommend The Wallflower Wager by Tessa. It's book 3 in her Girl Meets Duke series, and it's wonderful. I will say that the heroine is more of the Benedict than the hero in this, but it totally works. So our heroine is Penelope, and she is a lady, and she is a lady who loves animals. She lives like in the proper London townhouse with like a menagerie of like farm animals, not just like dogs and cats, like every kind of animal you can think. And this man, who they call the Duke of Ruin, who isn't a duke, but his name is Gabriel Duke, and he's risen from poverty to extreme wealth. He wants to marry someone wealthy. He wants to be seen as an important and trustworthy character in London. So he buys a house next door to a single proper lady. But that single proper lady is Penelope, and she is anything but. So she does not end up lending him the sort of reputation he was hoping for. But you know what? They end up having a fantastic relationship anyways. Next up, we have Colin, and Colin's story is of friends to lovers. And I'm not going to say who he ends up with, even though I think almost all of us know. But just in case you have no idea, I'm not going to be the one that tells you. So his story is friends to lovers. So I picked My Fake Rake by Eva Leigh. It also has a makeover in it, which the book version of Colin's story has a makeover. But I'm guessing that this TV series won't, or at least won't to the same extent. In My Fake Rake, we have Lady Grace Wyatt, and she is a wallflower. She does not like balls. She does not like doing any of that stuff. But her father has this sort of health scare and decides he really wants her to get married. And she's sort of been in love with this guy Mason for a while. And she finds out that he doesn't really even view her as a potential bride or even a woman. So she instead decides to ask her other really good friend Sebastian if she can give him a makeover and turn him into a rake, and they can fake date, and then it'll make Mason jealous. But of course they fall in love. But it's a great friends to lovers story because it's also these are two really, really smart people who are Grace is a naturalist and Sebastian's an anthropologist, but they can not do normal courting. They cannot do interactions with social groups. So they are just perfect for each other and made for each other. This book has a very hot scene in a barn. Stay for the hot scene in the barn. Next up, we have Eloise. I didn't really like Eloise's book. So instead, I'm going to recommend to you a book that I think Eloise's book should have been, and that's The Suffragette Scandal by Courtney Milan. So this is kind of the story I wanted Eloise to have. In The Suffragette Scandal, we have Frederica, who goes by Free, and she is women's rights all day long. She owns a newspaper and runs it, all about women's rights, and she is just throwing herself into the revolution of feminism. In this book takes place more the Victorian period, not the Regency. And then our hero is Edward, and he is a former soldier who was presumed dead, and he used to be a lord, and he has decided to sort of just leave that whole life behind and become kind of a criminal. His family has vowed revenge against Free because of something she wrote, and he decides to kind of get back at them by helping her, but he doesn't tell her who he is. Courtney Milan's books are interesting because if you've ever read one before, they start kind of slow and you're like, where's this going? Where's this going? And then you hit this point in the book where these books become unputdownable. So good. This is book, I think, 4 in the Brothers Sinister series, which you can buy the whole pack on Kindle, which is what I did, and then read them all and fall in love with them all because they're all very good. This is just the one that sets up well with Eloise. Next up, we have Francesca's book. If you are not aware of what happens with Francesca, jump to Hyacinth because this is a big spoiler. Francesca's book is a second chance romance because she is widowed at the beginning of her book, and then it's about her finding love again. So for that, I picked Where Dreams Begin by Lisa Kleypas, which is a similar story. In Where Dreams Begin, we have Zachary Bronson, who is new wealthy. And he is tired of people making fun of his mother and his sister for not understanding how society works and how they're supposed to drink their tea or whatever. So he hires Lady Holly Taylor, who is a widow with a small child, to sort of give his sister and his mom lessons as to how to behave in society. And she's extremely kind, which I think is my favorite thing about this, is she's so nice to them and she's really has a warm heart. Obviously, Zachary is going to fall in love with this woman, but there are some issues. She is widowed. She is an aristocrat. She does have a child. She's not the virginal bride he originally thought he was going to be getting, sort of to elevate him into society. This book has a fantastic scene in a greenhouse. I'm going to keep throwing in little tidbits like that. So is it a greenhouse or is it a gazebo? It might be a gazebo. Now I can't remember. I haven't read it in a while. It's either a greenhouse or a gazebo. Read it and let me know. Next, we've got Hyacinth's book, which I've made it no secret is my least favorite book. But it's got some sort of mystery in it with some diamonds. So instead, I'm going to give you a book that's a romance, that's a Regency, that has a mystery in it that I really enjoy. And that is Do You Want to Start a Scandal by Tessa Dare. In this book, we start with Pierce, our hero, and he's like snooping around in a room he's not supposed to be in during a ball. And then we have Charlotte, our heroine, who kind of happens upon him. They shouldn't be in a room together alone because they're not married and they're both single, and that's not proper. But then like all of a sudden they can hear like other people coming into the room, so they hide behind a curtain. But the other people who are coming in the room like bang on the desk, and people hear it and they escape before the other two, and now they are engaged because that's how life was back then. If you were thought to have been banging on a desk, even if it wasn't you, you had to marry that person. Charlotte doesn't want to marry Pierce. Pierce is like, she's hot, I'll marry her, I don't care. She doesn't want to marry Pierce. So she is going to find out who it was that banged on that desk so she doesn't have to marry him. But they end up falling in love. It's wonderful. It's super fun. I love Tessa Dare's books. They're super quirky and hilarious and great. And last we have Gregory. And I was actually having a really hard time thinking of a book for Gregory. Like the rest of these, I thought of one almost immediately. And then Gregory, I just kind of like sat and thought and thought. And I think it's partially because I think his characterization is similar to Benedict's. And his trope is mainly that there's a woman that Gregory thinks he's going to marry, but then he ends up realizing he's in love with someone else. So I went with Susan Enoch here and her book, It's Getting Scot in Here, which is the first book in like her Highlanders series. I can't remember exactly what the series is called. The premise of these books is that a Scottish man was married to an English woman. They didn't get along. They had 4 kids and then they split off. He kept the boys, she kept the girl. She's the money though. So she made him a deal that her sons could inherit the money, but only if they married an English woman of her choosing. So they all get sent down to London and they're like rowdy Scottish men, and they each have to pick a bride. And she's supposed to pick their bride, but she ends up being a little bit nice and giving them a little leeway. In the first book, we have our heroine, Amelia, and she is supposed to marry the oldest brother, whose name I can't remember, but he is like such an a-hole to her all the time. And his younger brother, Niall, starts being like, she's great, like she's beautiful and like super nice, and why is he acting like that? And so then he starts to kind of flirt with her and develop an attraction and thinking maybe she's the one for him. It's super fun. It's got that same trope of like the switcheroo, who you're interested in, who you're supposed to marry. This series is also like super high on action, which Gregory's book has like a really big action sequence at the end. So I think if you really like that, you'll like this series as well. And those are my recommendations for what you should read depending on which of the Bridgerton siblings is your favorite. I didn't do a book for Violet because I've never read Violet's story, though I probably should this summer. If you have any other recommendations that are similar to the Bridgerton stories, throw them in the comments because I'm sure other people watching would be really excited to get more book recommendations. As always, I hope you are in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. See you soon.